WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisCI to 44321.
Representative Shae Sortwell of Two Rivers is the Republican candidate for the 2nd Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Sortwell, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's a great service you guys provide for the state.
Well, thanks for participating in our interview. What is your campaign's key message? Why are you running for re-election?
You know, it's meat and potatoes. It's meat and potatoes. I remember a local official told me that once years ago when I was getting caught up in some more ancillary things, and he goes, but it's about the basics. It's about keeping taxes low. It's about keeping communities safe and making sure that the opportunity there for people to be successful. And so that's what this is about. This is what I've worked for the past several years, and we're going to keep fighting for.
So if you're reelected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
Oh, there's lots of bills. I've been one of the more prolific legislators as it relates to introducing bills and on so many different things, because if you knock on as many doors as I do, and I knock on 5,000 to 10,000 doors every election cycle, and you get a lot of different ideas from a lot of different people, and sometimes you wouldn't think that it's that important to people overall, but it might be a niche issue. So,
do you have a top priority for a bill?
You know, honestly, being the committee that I am on, that I chair so far, and we'll see if I get the same one again, is occupational licensing reform, trying to make it easier for people to get to work more quickly. It's been a problem here in Wisconsin. A lot of other states, red and blue states, have made reforms in that area, and we'll continue to work on that whole package of bills. I'm literally just had my staff try to call, now that we're past the primaries and we know who the candidates are going to be in some areas, to try to set up some meetings with some of my Democrat colleagues to see where we can have a meeting of the mind so these don't get vetoed this time around.
You know that if you're reelected, you're entering the legislature again during a biennial budget year. The state's projected to have more than a $3 billion surplus. Mm-hmm. What would be your top two priorities for use of that surplus?
Top two priorities? Well, tax relief is always a big one. We need to get the money back to the people, especially in these times of where, you know, while inflation has decreased, that doesn't decrease the cost of our goods and services. People go to the grocery store and they're paying more money, even though the increase is decreasing, it has still increased significantly. So tax reform is definitely going to be a big part of that. We need to get the money back to the people, back to our job creators. We need to make that happen. And secondly, honestly, I think another big priority as far as a single ticket item that I think we need to seriously look at is the cost of replacing GBCI, the Green Bay Correctional Institution. It's going to cost a lot of money to do it, but there's been a lot of problems there as well as Waupun. And I think we need to seriously look at, if we've got the cash on hand, this would be a great way to spend it rather than going into debt to spend for a new facility, which is common when you're building things.
K-12 education is a big priority for a lot of Wisconsin voters. Where does that land in your campaign's priorities?
Well, there's a couple of different things when we look at K through 12 education. I'll tell you, I have been growing more and more frustrated with the idea that simply throwing more and more money at K through 12 education as if that's going to fix things. And, I know the Republicans in the legislature have wanted to have some sort of checks and balances as far as making sure we have accountability for making sure kids are really being taught and they're being successful. And frustrating. I mean, look at Milwaukee. As far as I know, I think if they're not the most expensive district in the state, they're one of the most expensive districts in the state, where they're getting about $18,000 per kid. If you have a class of, say, 25 kids, that's almost $500,000 per classroom. Where is that money going? And why are the kids in Milwaukee, if you look at the testing out of Milwaukee, it's abysmal. So that's what we need to be looking at, is what can we actually do to pass to make sure kids are being taught instead of just throwing more money at schools? Unfortunately, every time we've tried that, we've run up against a brick wall with this governor, and even some of the smaller things we try to do, like the literacy bill, he uses line item veto to take out some of that accountability. So
you're looking for maybe more accountability?
We need accountability so kids are being taught. I mean, we've always supported additional monies as appropriate to keep up with inflation, but just throwing money is not the solution. Especially in some areas of the state, kids are falling behind, and unfortunately the other side of the aisle is not willing to look at real accountability to make sure that administrators and teachers that are not teaching the kids find other occupations.
What about higher education? The University of Wisconsin system, 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, technical colleges. What do you think the future looks like for higher education, and what's the role for the legislature? Yeah,
I think as far as K through 12, as far as higher education related to the tech schools and such, and the universities, we're going through some changes right now. I think a lot of young adults are starting to realize that maybe college, a regular traditional 4-year college, is not the path to their success in life. And so they're either opting for the tech schools, or they're opting for going into a union and being trained in one of the trades that way, through the, originally the youth apprenticeships and then into the real apprenticeships once they're adults. And so it wouldn't surprise me if we continue to see some contraction related to the 2-year colleges, because quite honestly, if you look at some of them, they're empty. And unlike Jill Underly, the superintendent of public instruction, I don't think we should be paying staff to go to an empty campus to teach nobody. She was the only regent to vote that way, to say let's keep the professors even though we have no students. It's ridiculous that she did that. The only one on the board. But no, I think that's probably going to happen in a few more of those 2-year colleges. And but you see UW Madison, for instance, has increased enrollment. So I think some of the 4-year colleges are going to see increased enrollment as the 2 years contract and as the tech schools also grow.
So more funding in higher ed, or a different path?
We will look at funding as appropriate. I mean, I know that was a bit of a contention in the last budget. To be perfectly honest, I think kids should be going to college and to tech schools in order to learn a trade or learn some sort of career, and not be taught about how they should be feeling guilty about the race that they happen to be. And so that was a fight in the last budget, and I expect us to continue to push on that and say, teach kids, don't indoctrinate kids.
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how do you propose to address it?
The largest workforce development challenge, there's a lot of challenges in the work. I mentioned before occupational licensing. That's a niche. It's not really a niche thing, but it's something that is my niche just because of what I work on, and we need to make it easier for people to get to work. Taxes are still a problem. Back when, if you look at the USA Today did an analysis of different states as it relates to business climate. And back when Scott Walker was still governor, we were right about in the middle. I don't remember the exact number. It was like 25, 26, something around there in our rankings. And now we're in the bottom 10. I don't remember the number now. I think it was 4 or 5. It doesn't matter. We're bottom 10.
Do you want a flat tax, or what specific tax change would affect the workforce?
We need to be looking at flat tax. We need to be looking at moving to a sales tax model. We need to be looking at lowering corporate taxes. I know everyone on the Democrat side seems to think that businesses are evil, but I tell you, I mean, that businesses create jobs, and so we want more of them to come to Wisconsin and to open up more and more jobs. And the other side of that same coin, from an economic standpoint, that people is under the radar and a lot of people aren't aware of, is the high cost of electricity here in Wisconsin. Electricity is actually quite expensive. I sit on the utility committee, and we need to be looking at expanding our production of electricity here in Wisconsin. Right now we are a net importer of electricity. We have to bring it to the state, and we have a lot of our big industries take a lot of power. Paper takes a lot of power. Foundries take a lot of power. Those are electric furnaces. So we need to be looking at encouraging more electrical growth too, and that will bring then the cost of production down, which will then help our economy as well.
Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy, as you're just saying. These investments also provide an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there aren't any requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
I'll have to consider that and look at the impacts on that. I'm a numbers kind of guy. I do generally favor that philosophy. Part of the problem, though, is sometimes when you're talking about large projects, you may not even have available to you the workers for a large project in that state. The Michaels Corporation is a good example. They're based here in Wisconsin, but they may end up, if they're putting in either a road or a pipeline or whatever, they may have to bring in a bunch of subcontractors from all over the place, possibly, depending on how big that project is. And so that has to be approached very carefully.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue, and what do you think should be done about it?
I have heard a few people in the media talk about it. I've heard a couple people from certain political parties talk about it. I'll tell you, I have not had a single person in my district bring that issue up to me. Not a single one. In the 6 years that I've represented the state, represented my district, and in the literally tens of thousands of doors I've knocked on. So if it's a huge, serious issue in Wisconsin, I don't know why nobody's telling me. So I have a hard time thinking this is that I'm sure it happens, but I don't think it's as big of an issue as some people think.
Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some have proposed government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue that keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What's your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control, building more rentals, or some other solution?
Well, rent control has worked so well. That's why cost of rentals in San Francisco is low, right? And cost of rentals in New York is really low, right? Because it's been so successful. It's just hilarious, really. It's sad, but hilarious that, the Democrats continue to bring this issue up, even though every time and in every place they've ever tried it, it always fails. I mean, Ireland just rolled back their rent controls a couple of years ago because literally they ended up with not enough rentals. People had no place to rent.
What's the solution?
There's a number of different solutions. One of them is deregulation to make it easier so that people could actually build, remove government red tape so they can actually build new apartments. I know there was a number of things we passed over the last few years. Some of them the governor signed, some of them he vetoed, which would have been, he was fine with the ones that spent taxpayer money. He was less happy with the ones that actually cut red tape to actually make it cheaper and easier to build, which is a problem that he wouldn't support those. Another thing we have to seriously look at, too, to be quite honest, and I know there's going to be some municipalities that don't like this, but we need to seriously look at rezoning. Because right now, a lot of communities are zoned in such a way that it is very difficult to build inexpensive housing. Not just the apartments. The apartments are one thing, but small starter family homes. The first home I owned was in Green Bay. It was like 1,300 square feet, and I paid $84,000 for it 15 or so years ago. And but it was on a lot that was 50 by 150. That has huge impacts. You'd think it's just the cost of the land, which is impactful, the fact that you have a smaller lot. But it's more than that, because also when you have to run the pipes, when you have to run the electrical, when you have to run the curb and gutter, when you have to run the roads, in all these new construction, the wider the lots, the more expensive all of that is, to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars when you force these lots to be bigger. And I actually think it's for the benefit of the renters to have smaller homes to be able to purchase as the next step up, so they're not staying in the apartments long term, so the next group of people can come in. And it's good for people in general, because once you own a home, there's a sense of responsibility and there's a sense of maintenance that you have. We need these starter homes that right now we can't, and in part it's due to zoning.
Moving on to healthcare. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
See, I don't know what you're talking about. I thought Obama fixed the entire healthcare system, didn't he? Obamacare fixed everything. Oh, wait, that's just made it even worse. Here's the thing. There's a lot of things we can try to do to work on this. We passed the APRN bill to allow nurse practitioners to be able to work with less oversight from doctors who are basically just collecting money off of them rather than actually really providing oversight and service. So allow them to practice. Governor's vetoed that, twice now? It's frustrating that he doesn't trust nurses to be able to practice within their scope of practice. So we've had that bill. We had the bills to try to help bring in new workers for occupational licensing, to bring in that the hospital association support, say, hey, especially the ones that are on the borders, like with Minnesota, they have Gunderson has employees on both sides of the river, and they want to be able to have their employees be able to go back and forth and provide teleservices and all this kind of thing. Governor vetoed the bill. We tried to give money to that hospital that was shutting down in western Wisconsin. Governor vetoed the bill. So it's frustrating that it seems like every time we come up with a solution to try to work on this and improve the situation, the governor vetoes the bill. As far as I could tell, the only solution he's really open to is, he wants to, take Medicaid expansion. That's the only thing he wants, which sounds good on paper until you get into the nitty-gritty, which we don't have time for now. But if you actually run the numbers on it, is actually destructive. And the states that have been in a similar situation to us when they took expansion had huge results of negatives.
What about mental health care? What are you hearing about that in your district, and are there any solutions for that issue? We've obviously worked on that. There's been a number of different things we worked on. I worked on a couple of bills with Senator Coles from this area to try to allow for schools to be able to bill for treatment that students receive. Also, we have tried to, once again, through occupational licensing, make it easier for people to be able to get their licenses. There's been some reforms we try to do in that area. We obviously put some more money into that. Ultimately, are you hearing about this?
I hear about it. I hear about it, and the frustrating part is, to an extent, we brought it on ourselves, because the government response. We already had problems before, and sorry, I'm a Christian, and I think until we turn back to God, we're going to continue to have problems in all of these areas. But that aside, we've exacerbated that problem during COVID by shutting people off from the world, by putting masks on their face for extended periods of time so they couldn't actually see a human smile, couldn't interact with people really. Took them away from their loved ones in nursing homes, so that literally their grandmothers and grandparents and moms and dads were dying alone in nursing homes, and they weren't allowed to interact with their children and grandchildren. We took kids away from their friends at schools. So government caused this. And I don't know that government is the solution to everything. We can continue to provide support, but ultimately it's going to come down to, people finding value in their lives. My personal view on that is finding value in your life in Christ, but that's my opinion.
Well, moving on to another issue that's important to many Wisconsinites, abortion. How should Wisconsin move forward on abortion policy?
I voted for a bill to send it to the people. And it was frustrating that the governor said he didn't care what the people had to say on that issue and said he would veto that bill. So I've been pro-life since before I got elected. I don't think that abortion is, let me rephrase, is hardly ever the solution to issues that you're facing. And is
there any number of weeks that you would support, or are you pro-life at all?
I have always supported as the exception the life of the mother, that was the important exception that we always need to keep. The bill that the Assembly passed and I voted for established 14 weeks, but only if the people of Wisconsin themselves agreed to it. And that's what we attempted to do, to send to the people, say, if this is what you want, that you want to do a 14-week abortion ban, then vote for it yourself. And it was frustrating that the governor, even before we had a chance, that's part of why I think it didn't pass the state Senate, is before he even got a chance to go to the state Senate, the governor said he would veto the bill. And I don't know how you could say you want to represent the people if you won't let the people vote on something.
Transportation. What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these needs are addressed and for the state to keep on schedule with the reconstruction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Well, related to roads and such, I mean, there's always, we always need more money with the more rural roads, especially with the changing of the district. My district has become a lot more rural than it was. I was kind of 50-50 before. Now I'm like 70% rural as far as the geographical area. And so, we're going to continue to invest in roads and make sure that the towns and the villages have what they need to fix those roads. That's about all I hear is on the transportation side. I have had in the past some other discussions, and I have worked on a bill to try to make it cheaper for people who have assisted transportation, from different services for, they have to go to medical appointments, whatever, they have to have transportation. I worked on a bill with Senator Coles again. Sorry to lose him from the legislature. He was a great asset. But worked on a bill with him to try to follow what I think it was Pennsylvania did as a pilot program to allow people to combine trips. So sometimes you have to go to the grocery store, and you might have to go to the doctor's office. You may have to go to the pharmacy, and all these trips. And unfortunately, because of the way billing works
for Medicaid,
for these reimbursements and these programs, you can't necessarily make all those stops. You have to take one trip for one thing and then one trip for another. It's hugely inefficient, costs the taxpayers more, and quite honestly is annoying for the people who are using the service.
Will you try to bring that back?
We will try to bring it back again. And yeah, hopefully we'll have to find a new senator because he was my Senate lead on it, but we'll work on it, yeah.
What about PFAS and water contaminants? They're concerned for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how does it need to be addressed?
Water is an important issue. I wrote a dredging bill it took 3 years to get that one done. That was far simpler than PFAS, but we wrote a dredging bill for lakeshore communities to be able to responsibly take care of their harbor dredgings in a financially responsible way as well as a environmentally responsible way, supported by every lakeshore community. And that took 3 years. Incidentally, Cole's helped me with that one again, too. He keeps coming up. I told me he should have run again. But anyways, so, as far as the direct contamination of PFAS, I'm not aware of any real serious issues within my district. They're obviously more up by Peshtigo and some other areas. So I'm sure those representatives from those areas will continue to take the lead on that, and we'll look to make some responsible choices. But we also don't want to go so far that in standards that are not workable.
Last two questions. How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
I thought about that question for a little bit, and honestly, I've run into my Democrat competition. I prefer to call her my competition, not my opponent. I've run across my competition a couple of times at a few events, which is, to be honest, more than I can say for some of my previous competitors. So she's out there and she's active, and she seems like a nice lady. So I have nothing negative to say about her personally, and I wouldn't want to do that anyways. I would say, though, as I thought about this, the biggest difference between the two of us is really the basic approach that we have for how we look at government. I look at government and the role that government is supposed to have, that government is supposed to protect the rights of the people. And that's its purpose. That's what the Declaration of Independence says, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. We have laws against theft because we're protecting your private property rights. We have laws against murder because we're protecting your right to life. These are the rights that we are protecting, and that's supposed to be our purpose. Unfortunately, too many people, and it's not just her, there's a lot of people in government, right and left, that instead look at government as the way to push their own personal views and to save society from what they think it shouldn't be. And frustratingly, that's never successful. I mean, we talked briefly before we started the interview about marijuana reform, and my views on that I've supported a marijuana reform. That was actually making that illegal in the beginning. Was the idea is we're going to use government to fix society. That's why they made it illegal. Well, how successful has that been? It's not been successful. And so But that's how she looks at government, is how can we use government to improve society, to make it what I want it to be, versus I believe how can government protect the rights of the people so that they can be successful and find their path to success.
Final question for you. If you're reelected and you get this magic wand you can use in the state capitol to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties together, what is that issue?
You know, a magic wand is not what I want. What I'd rather have is a crystal ball. And I would like some of my colleagues to understand the repercussions of what it is that they would want, that they think is a good idea. I mean, we've seen bills that are introduced that literally would be destructive to the restaurant industry, destructive to housing. But they're all feel-good ideas. They're all the ideas that people think, you know, you can talk to somebody and it's like, well, that makes some sense. It looks nice, until you actually see it in action. You know, you talked about the housing controls the price controls for rentals. It sounds good. Vice President Harris is talking about going after the price gouges, which of course is not legal anyways. You can't really do it. But it sounds good until you see what the results of that is. As soon as you start having these wide sweeping price controls on all these different things, the result is economic collapse. It's happening in socialist and communist countries over and over and over again. And these ideas are failures. All we have to do is learn from the past, see where we would end up, and say, that idea doesn't work. Let's commit to the ideas that do work. And the ideas that do work are lower taxes, less regulation on our job creators, and protecting the rights of the people. You do those things, society works.
Well, Representative Shae Sortwell from Two Rivers, the Republican candidate in the 2nd Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Thank you, Representative Sortwell, for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.